Oktober 23. 1942. 30,000 feet above Simpson Harbor, Rabaul, New Britain. The world is a hard, white glare. The sea below is a mirror you could cut your hand on. Inside B-17, Farads 41-2, 4592. Call sign Thunderer, the air is thin, the oxygen is cold, and the metal groans like a ship in winter. Lieutenant Jack Ellison, 24, gloved hands on the yoke, feels the tremor of 4 right cyclones through the column, steady as a heartbeat. Formation left and right, 9 fortresses in 2 neat echelons, contrails streaming like chalk lines scratched across the sky. Ahead, Simpson Harbor freighters, a tender, a dozen barges, and that fat, gray ammunition hulk tied in 2 neat a row. He can see the black freckles of anti-aircraft pits along the ridge and the white ramps of volcanoes shouldering up behind Rabaul's roofs. Bombay doors, Ellison says, voice flat through his A-14 mask. Inboard, outboard, replies Achateslupent. Sam Ortega, bombardier, from the plexiglass nose. The doors whine open. Cold slams up through the fuselage, canvas jackets snap. Ortega's face is a pale crescent behind the sight. He cradles the Norden like a priest with reliquary bones. He has the target, the powder ship, riding dead center on the crosshairs, its wake a thread of light. Pilot, you're flying for me, Ortega adds, and now Ellison surrenders the airplane to a man squinting through a glass world the size of a dinner plate. Thunderer to flight. Ellison keys the throat mic, eyes flicking to the leader above. Steady on the run, no jinking. Roger, crackles Captain Breedlove from the lead fortress. Maintain altitude, 30,000. The altimeter wobbles and sets. The intercom hisses. Breathing, breathing, always breathing. Top turret. Tech Sergeant Frank Rossi rotates the twin 50 seconds and tastes salt on his lips. Contrails at 2 o'clock high, he says. Long and skinny. Climbing. He knows the look of them fast, white scrib. Waist. CPL. Dan McKenna and CPL Luis Ruiz slap ammo cans, check feed chutes, then hit their suit heaters with mittened thumbs. Tail, Sergeant. Eddie Pruitt squints through the tiny window at the faraway glints. The sun is behind the fortresses. Perfect any attacker will come up into it and squint into God's own searchlight. Thunderer, radio, comes Sergeant Walter Sparks Dugan from his table. Townsville relays intercepts. Rabaul caps scrambled. 12, no. Make that 16 A6Ms. Tainan boys. Zeros, Pruitt says, tasting the word like iron. Far below, the harbor flashes with tiny, stuttering thorns, light flags searching, guessing. Then the black puffs begin, proper bursts with red hearts stacked like a staircase above the ships. The fortresses fly into it because that is what fortresses do. Straight, steady, unflinching on the bomb run. You can feel that steadiness in your palms even if you're only watching this unfold. 30 seconds, Ortega says. Do not deviate. In the ragged blue to the east, they appear neat V-icicles that break and scatter into single points. Petty Officer First Class Masao Takeda feels his fingers tingle on the stick of his A6M2. He remembers, not without a grin, the wardroom chatter. American heavy bomber, slow, fat, turning like an ox cart. Flying Fortress, the cartoon in the paper called it. He keys his radio. Do not be timid. Their backs are soft, he says, laughter under his words. The Zeros fan out into sections of 2, climbing obliquely, the light silvering their wings. Top turret. They're coming head on, one high, one low, and some are going to rake the tail, Rossi calls. He thumbs the safety off. Let 'em. Bomb run, Ortega repeats. He is a man underwater, everything slow, precise. He calls slight corrections and Ellison obeys without question, nudging rudder, easing aileron. In the nose glass, Ortega can see the ship fattening its deck cargo, covered with tarpaulins that slat in the wind. The first A6M slashes past the lead box, a white needle flicking the Sunday. The fortress above them spits a straight, bright thread from chin to cockpit, the synchronized flicker of 50 seconds stitching the sky. Pieces come off the Zero's right wing like shards of plate. The fighter rolls and goes by, trailing a yarn of smoke. Takeda's grin snuffs itself out. He rolls into a high side pass, angling towards Thunderer's left wing. 2 o'clock high, Rossi barks. He squeezes, the guns roar, and the 360-degree turret turns with the smoothness of a vault door. Shell casings pour into the catch bags. McKenna's waist gun awakens with a ripping snarl. He speaks in bursts because he knows about barrel heat. Ruiz, opposite, answers like an echo. The noise is not in your ears, but in your chest, a hammering you can lean against. Pruitt in the tail catches a 0 coming low and fast, the perfect line that training posters warn you about. He lets the fighter grow, just a little, just enough to be certain, and then he walks the tracers up the engine, cowling. The 0 shudders. Its canopy jerks open like an eyelid torn wide. It shears under the fortress, so close Pruitt tastes the burned oil tang through the oxygen mask. Good hits! Good hits! Sparks Dugan whoops involuntarily, then quieter. Flak getting tighter. M's end. Out ahead, in the nose, Ortega whispers to the bomb sight. Easy. Easy. Steady. His thumb hovers over the toggle. The ship's shadow is a black comma sliding across the harbor water. The flak ladder climbs past them, one rung at a time, shells bursting level with the cockpit now, bright chrysanthemums that thump through the fuselage as if thrown by giants. Takeda feels the whipsaw crack as 50 rounds fan across his canopy. He dives under and pulls up hard to rake the belly, the supposed weakness. Instead of a soft underbelly, he meets the bald, glassy eye of a Sperry Ball turret, and inside it a small man with a square jaw, Sergeant Calvin Shorty Kim, who looks like he was born to hang upside down under airplanes. Twin guns in the ball wake and scream, and Takeda's reflex saves him. He half rolls, and his tracers whip past the belly of the fortress, harmless. He swears, because whoever named the bomber soft had not flown this close to its quills. Ortega, Ellison says, not a question so much as a thread of tie-down rope reminding them all what they're doing here. On, Ortega's voice is a metronome. The harbor is a geometry problem solved in steel. You can see the ship's deck crew scattering like black beads on a plate. The sight's gyro hums, the crosshairs float and bite. Ortega's thumb drops. Bombs, away. The fortress shudders as 5,000 pounds fall free. The bay yawns and empties. The plane leaps light. Across the formation, tiny dark eggs drop in a flat, elegant curtain. The sound goes thin and then returns. Guns barking, flak punching, engines sawing air. Ortega keeps his face in the sight, an extra heartbeat to mark, always mark before lifting. Good pattern, he says, voice cracking with the cold. Good. White light fills the nose. A black puff blooms where the leader should be. Breedlove's ship staggers, then steadies. A square hole torn in the left wing behind the engine. Ellison's wrists tighten on the yoke. Right turn. Rally north, he calls, but he knows every fortress does. There is no turning until the run is done. Not here. Not now. Behind them, Takeda pulls vertical, bleeding speed, rage replaced by calculation. He will not come belly on again. He will rake the cockpit from oblique high, in, fire, and out the way they taught him, before Pride wrote new rules. He levels, slides his nose across Thunderer's canopy, and squeezes. The windshield cracks like ice. Ellison flinches but holds. Rossi screams something that is not words. Pruitt, cold as a January nail, swings and cuts a line into Takeda's starboard wing root. For a heartbeat, fighter and bomber hang stitched together by burning threads. Below, between volcano and sea, the harbor begins to bloom. The first bomb detonates amidships on the ammunition barge. For a second, nothing, only a bulge of light, like lightning trapped beneath the sea. Then the sound reaches up and claws the air. A sheet of flame peels open the harbor. Smoke erupts in tall, twisting columns, black and red, the heat turning seawater into boiling mist. The concussion slams through Thunderer, rattling every rivet and rib. Ortega's teeth clack so hard he tastes blood. Direct hit. Rossi yells from the top turret, half in disbelief. Jesus, that's her! That's the ammo ship! The entire formation trembles as the shockwave passes. The sky flickers with reflected fire. Even through their oxygen masks, the crew can smell cordite, fuel, and salt. Below, the neat Japanese docks dissolve into chaos, fuel drums spinning, cranes tipping, smaller vessels erupting like matchsticks. The fortress's shadow crosses the inferno like a silent witness. But victory, up here, is never quiet for long. Bandits! 6 o'clock low, 2 sections. Pruitt calls from the tail, voice sharp as wire. Coming fast! Four Zeros claw upward from the smoke, their wings flashing in the firelight. The pilots, young men from the 253rd Kokutai, pull into attack arcs with mechanical precision. They've learned from the morning's losses, they won't take the fortress head-on again. Takeda, half blind from a bullet crease on his canopy, leads them in. Aim for the rudder and engines, he tells his wingmen, his voice tight. Don't waste bullets on that armor. Armor, he spits the word. He knows now it's true. The flying fortress bleeds metal but doesn't die. He's seen Zeros, Shred, PBYs, Hudsons, even Marauders, but these things? They are machines built like temples, carved from steel and defiance. Pruitt tracks the incoming fighters through his periscope sight, breathing slow. His twin, 50 seconds, chatter and recoil like a heartbeat. Tracers stitch the air, orange beads whipping upward. 1-0 slides through them untouched, rolling to starboard and climbing for the high rear pass. The other isn't so lucky, its right wing bursts into a confetti of aluminum, the fuselage spinning into the sea. Rossi's guns join in, arcs of light converging with McKenna's waist gun. For a brief second, the B-17 is less airplane, more storm, a moving thunderhead made of smoke, brass, and flame. It spits metal in every direction, a porcupine of gunfire. That's when the Japanese start calling it the Kazan no Toge, the Fortress of Thorns. Ellison banks right shallow, feeling the controls shudder. Formation, maintain course 270, he orders. We're heading home. The intercom crackles. Left waist reporting hits, but I'm still good, McKenna calls. Rudder cables intact, ammo low. Copy, McKenna. Keep your line clean. Ellison checks his gauges number 2, engine's temperature climbing. Not fatal, not yet. Sparks Dugan's headset buzzes with static. Townsville command copies. They say our photographs show... Christ, Jack. They say Rabaul's dock is gone. Flattened. Complete secondary detonations. Ortega exhales, long and shaky. He leans his head against the cold glass of the Norden site. The smoke below is now a single black tower scraping the stratosphere. He remembers what one of the engineers had told him before takeoff. If the fortress doesn't scare them, the truth will precision at 30,000 feet. But Rabaul isn't finished. The flak gunners on the ridge have recovered their composure. Black puffs begin to step upward again, closer now, smarter. One burst punches near the port wingtip. The shrapnel patters against the fuselage like sleet. We're taking hits on 3, Rossi calls. Ellison steadies the yoke, keeping her level. Keep your fire controlled, he reminds his men. Don't waste it. Remember what they said, she can take it. Inside the cockpit, the vibration feels alive. The whole aircraft hums, a body of nerves and muscle. Outside, the sunlight turns metallic, and still the fortresses fly. Down below, Takeda watches in awe through the smoke haze. The American bombers, ragged but together, climb slowly northward, each leaving behind a thin contrail pale against the fire. He banks toward them again, determined. His wingman hesitates. They're too high, the younger pilot warns. They're gunners. Takeda snarls. They are iron ships. We are men. We must strike. He pulls up, his Zero shivering under the strain. The fortress ahead looms huge, its tail guns already spitting death. Takeda aligns his sight on the right inboard engine, thumb ready on the trigger. Inside Thunderer, Pruitt tracks him. He can almost see the man's face pale, eyes fierce. He fires first. 2 bursts. The tracers march neatly into the Zero's nose. Takeda's aircraft flares white, then folds in on itself, spinning end over end into the sea he once called home. Rossi watches it go, silent. Then, scratch another one, he mutters. They're learning the hard way. For the next 7 minutes, the sky above Rabaul becomes a private battlefield, a deadly ballet of intersecting contrails and flashing guns. Fortress gunners claim 5 more attackers. 2 B-17 seconds limp with wounded engines but remain aloft. No one breaks formation, not once. At last, Ellison feels the flak thin out. The blue deepens, clean again. All ships climb to 31,000 and turn heading 180, he calls. We're clear. Ortega removes his mask and lets the air sting his face. They said we were slow, he murmurs. They said we couldn't fight. Rossi's laugh crackles through the intercom. They can keep talking. We'll keep flying. Oh. Hours later, the battered fortresses land at Townsville. Mechanics swarm the runways, pointing at the bullet holes, peppering the fuselages like metal freckles, hundreds of them. Reporters arrive, snapping photos. One correspondent, still dusted in Pacific salt, asks Ellison, "What do you call that up there, Lieutenant, when you face 20 fighters and keep going?" Ellison looks at his aircraft, the scarred aluminum skin, the soot around the guns, the faint smell of oil and cordite clinging to the air. He answers softly, "We call that a fortress doing what she was built to do." Word spreads quickly to Rabaul, to Tokyo, to every pilot who once laughed at the Americans' slow, lumbering bombers. And by the end of 1942, the laughter stops. December 1942. Rabaul's airfield still smolders. The wrecks of Zeros, Hayabusas, and Betty bombers are being dragged into piles by exhausted ground crews. A light rain falls, hissing on twisted aluminum. The scent of burned fuel lingers like an omen. Captain Ichiro Hayashi of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service stands beneath the wing of a shattered Mitsubishi A6M. He squints at the wreckage of his friend Takeda's fighter, now just a warped skeleton pulled from the shallows. The reports say his rounds hit one of the enemy's bombers squarely in the fuselage, but the giant kept flying, trailing smoke like a scar across the sky. "Flying fortress," Hayashi says, the English words awkward on his tongue. The men around him nod grimly. It is no longer a joke. What began as laughter in briefing rooms across the Pacific has turned into a whispered superstition among Japanese pilots. Never attack a fortress head-on. Even the most daring Zeros hesitate when the glint of sunlight reveals that unmistakable profile, twin tails, deep belly, 13 guns bristling like fangs. Far to the south, at the American base in Townsville, the crews of the 19th Bomb Group prepare for another sortie. Mechanics patch bullet holes with new aluminum sheets. Armorers feed belts of 50 caliber rounds into ammunition boxes as though weaving cloth. Lieutenant Ellison, now promoted to captain, walks the length of Thunderer as the sun rises. He stops beneath the wing where fresh rivets gleam like silver stitches. Ortega joins him, coffee steaming in hand. "Orders?" he asks. "Rabaul again," Ellison says, eyes still on the horizon. "This time they'll be ready for us." "They were ready last time," Ortega replies with a half smile. Ellison grins back, the kind of grin only men who've survived the impossible can manage. Let's see how much they've learned. The B-17 seconds lift off one by one, their 4 engines shaking the dawn. Each takeoff is a ritual steel birds rising from red earth, burdened with both bombs and memory. Over the intercom, the crews joke to chase away fear, the words tinny but human. "Let's go deliver some mail," McKenna says. Rossi replies, "Express delivery 30,000 feet." At altitude, the Pacific spreads below like hammered glass. The fortresses form up into their boxes, steady as the grid lines of a map. They are not fast, but they are disciplined, each gunner's arc overlapping, every approach angle covered. Together, they are less like airplanes and more like a moving citadel. Ahead lies Rabaul, fortified, scarred, and waiting. In the control tower at Rabaul, Hayashi watches his radar operators trace the incoming dots. He knows what's coming. "Send up all available Zeros," he orders. "Do not engage individually. Attack in groups from the side." "Yes, Captain," a junior officer says, but his voice trembles. Everyone here knows the stories. Pilots returning home with wings shredded, engines coughing, faces ghost white from the shock of meeting those American machines. Hayashi climbs into his own aircraft, a fresh A6M3 with the rising sun painted clean across its wings. He straps in, heart steady. If they bleed, they can die, he tells himself. 30,000 feet above the Solomon Sea, Thunderer drones onward. Inside the belly turret, Shorty Kim checks his feed belt, humming a tune half sung, half breathed. "You think they'll come for us again, boss?" he calls through the intercom. "They always do," Ellison answers, "and we'll be waiting." The radar alert comes 15 minutes later. Bogies, 20 plus, bearing northeast. The crew tightens, guns swivel, the oxygen hiss grows louder in the silence. Through the cockpit glass, Ellison sees them tiny specks swelling into wings. "Rossi, top turret, too high left. Tail, you've got 3 o'clock low." He keeps his tone calm, deliberate. "All positions fire at will." Then the sky explodes. The first wave of Zero streaks through the formation, firing in blinding bursts. A fortress off their right wing bursts into smoke, its crew bails out, white parachutes blossoming like petals. Pruitt's voice crackles. 3 incoming from below, lining up on us. Kim fires first. His tracers cut a glowing spiral through the cold air. 1-0 bursts into flame, plunging into the ocean below. McKenna's waist gun rakes another, its wing folding like paper. The air smells of hot oil and ozone. Rossi keeps his turret spinning, firing short, vicious bursts. He counts his rounds under his breath, 500, 450, 400 pouty, the rhythm of survival. Tail, how are we looking? Ellison calls. Like hell, Pruitt answers, but they're not getting closer. Hayashi dives into the melee. He lines up on the lead Fortress Ellison's ship, waiting for the perfect shot. The gun sights flash green, but before he can fire, bullets rake across his canopy. The world erupts in shards of plexiglass. He banks hard, smoke trailing. Through the spin, he glimpses it again, the hulking silver beast, calm amid chaos, its guns still firing, its wings steady. He levels out, gasping for air, disbelief in his eyes. They're not machines, he mutters, they're monsters. He limps home, barely keeping the Zero aloft. Below him, the harbor is in ruins once more. Back at Townsville, the American crews tally their damage. 3 fortresses lost, 8 wounded, dozens of Japanese fighters confirmed destroyed. The mood in the mess hall is strange, somber, proud, exhausted. Rossi scribbles on a napkin, "They mocked us once." Ellison glances at it and nods. Not anymore. Across the Pacific, in Tokyo, intelligence officers study photographs of Rabaul's smoking ruins. A note on the bottom of the report reads, "Enemy heavy bomber identified. Boeing B-17. Heavily armed, highly resistant to damage. Recommended engagement, avoid head-on attacks." The laughter is gone from their voices. Now, there is only respect and fear. March 1943. Over the Solomon Islands, the war in the air has changed. What once began as skirmishes between fragile machines now unfolds as colossal duels between fortresses and predators. The Japanese still fly with courage, but courage alone cannot pierce the armor of the B-17. What they had once mocked, they now study. What they had dismissed, they now dread. At dawn, 18 flying fortresses rise from Townsville, bound for the island of Cavien Rabaul's northern lifeline. The mission is simple on paper: destroy the airfield and supply depots. In practice, it is suicide with a map. Captain Ellison's Thunderer flies in the low left position of the lead box. The engines hum like a sermon. Ortega adjusts his bomb sight again and again, though it's already calibrated to perfection. Rossi checks his twin 50s with a mechanical tenderness, like a man tuning an instrument before battle. McKenna and Ruiz trade cigarettes through their oxygen hoses, a small act of rebellion against the cold. Below them, the Pacific is an infinite mirror. The sunrise paints the silver bellies of the fortresses gold. To a distant observer, they might look peaceful, slow, stately, but inside each one are men who have seen too much sky burn. At 28,000 feet, the first flak bursts begin small black flowers blooming in impossible places. Flak ahead, scattered, Rossi reports. Ellison doesn't flinch. Steady on. 30 seconds to IP. They are flying into a hornet's nest. By now, the Japanese know the pattern, the altitude, even the sound of the American engines. Waiting for them over Cavien are 22 Zeros and 4 twin-engine fighters. The ambush begins at 9:12. Bandits, 3 high, closing fast, Rossi barks. The top turret swings like lightning. They're not diving, they're pacing us. Let them, Ellison mutters. The Zeros fan out into an arc, staying just outside effective range. Then, as one, they dart in tiny silver knives, slicing across the formation. Bullets rake through the air, sparking off fuselages, punching holes through aluminum skin. Thunderer shakes, her left wing peppered. But her guns answer in a single, thunderous voice. Ortega can barely see for the smoke swirling around his nose window. "We're hit!" "Hold that sight," Ellison shouts. "We're almost there." "Oh?" Another Zero comes in from above, diving straight through the formation. Rossi tracks him perfectly, firing in 2 short bursts. The fighter disintegrates in mid-air, falling past them like a comet. From the tail, Pruitt watches it burn. You'd think they'd learn by now, he says through clenched teeth. Learning gets you killed up here, Kim replies from the ball turret. The bombs fall clean. A line of explosions ripples through the Kavieng airfield, fuel tanks erupting, hangars splitting open, a parked bomber cartwheeling into flame. Ortega keeps his eyes fixed on the site, even as shrapnel patters against the glass. On target, he says calmly, though his voice trembles. Perfect run. Turn 270, Ellison orders. Get us out. Behind them, the smoke columns rise like black spires. The return flight is chaos. 2 fortresses are missing. A third limps on one engine. The Zeros chase them halfway to the sea, nipping at their tails like wolves. But every gunner aboard the surviving ships fights until his barrels glow. In the end, they break free, flying home in silence, alive but changed. That night, in the officers' mess, the men eat in near darkness, only the hum of ceiling fans breaking the quiet. The cook has burned the coffee again. Nobody cares. Rossi reads from a Japanese leaflet captured on a downed pilot earlier that week. He holds it up to the light. Listen to this, he says. Our brave airmen call the American bomber the Bakatetsu Tori, the stupid iron bird. It is slow and ungainly, but beware its tail, for it spits fire. He looks around the table. That's us, boys. The stupid iron birds. McKenna grins. I'll take stupid if it gets me home. Ellison laughs softly, shaking his head. They used to call us that because they thought we couldn't fight. Now they call us that because they can't stop us. Oh, the room fills with weary laughter, the kind that hides the tremor in the bones. Outside, the jungle hums with crickets, oblivious to the war above its canopy. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, senior officers review intercepted American reports. Grainy reconnaissance photos show the wreckage at Rabaul, Kavieng, and Truk entire depots wiped clean. A stern-faced admiral points to one image, an airfield cratered beyond use. Who flew this, he asks. American, sir, the aide replies. They call it the B-17 Flying Fortress. The admiral nods, slow and grim. A fitting name. Across the Pacific, newsreels begin to show the same story. Silver bombers silhouetted against the sun, flak bursting below, gunners smiling through oil-streaked faces. American audiences cheer, unaware that each of those faces carries the weight of ghosts. To the Japanese, the silhouette becomes a warning. To the Americans, it becomes a promise. Everywhere it flies, the B-17 earns new names: Castle in the Sky, Heavenly Fortress, the Anvil of Rabaul. But among those who fight beneath its wings, one truth endures. It is not just a bomber. It is the hammer that shapes the Pacific War. August 1945. The Pacific is silent again. The gunfire has stopped. The skies, once thick with vapor trails, are now empty, but for the gulls. On the tarmac at Hickam Field, rows of B-17 seconds stand quietly, their engines cold, their aluminum skins dulled by salt and time. They look like relics from another world, monuments of metal and memory. Captain Jack Ellison, older now, with streaks of gray at his temples, runs a hand along the fuselage of Thunderer. He can still trace the scars, bullet holes patched with dull rivets, the faint scorch marks near the ball turret, the small stenciled kill marks under the cockpit window. Ortega joins him, limping slightly from an old flak wound. Hard to believe she's done, Ortega says. They're grounding the last of the forts next month, replacing them with the superforts. He means the B-29, the sleek, pressurized successor that carried the war into Japan's heart. Ellison nods, silent. His eyes drift across the quiet airfield. Mechanics are already stripping parts from the older bombers, their tools echoing in the dawn. The fortresses that once ruled the skies will soon be aluminum ghosts, melted down into the skeletons of peacetime machines. Remember Rabaul? Ortega asks. Ellison smiles faintly. Every day. In Japan, Captain Ichiro Hayashi stands on the edge of an airfield littered with the broken shells of his country's defeat. He has survived the war, though his squadron has not. The sky that once belonged to him is now occupied by foreign planes. He kneels beside a burnt-out Zero, running his fingers across the melted wings. The emblem of the rising sun is barely visible through the ash. For the first time in years, he allows himself to speak the enemy's name aloud. Boeing B-17, he murmurs. The fortress that would not fall. He remembers the day Takeda died, the day Rabaul burned, and the laughter died with it. He remembers the metallic storm, the unyielding roar, the way the bombers flew straight into fire and never wavered. They fought like gods, he whispers. No, not gods. Men who refuse to die quietly. He bows his head, not in worship, but in respect. The flying fortress was never supposed to be beautiful. It was built for function, not grace. Yet in the aftermath of the war, its image became iconic. The wide wings, the blunt nose, the defensive guns bristling like defiance itself. To the airmen who flew her, she was home, a cold, noisy, faithful home. She was the space between life and death, between duty and fear. She carried them through the fire and brought most of them back. Not all, but most. Over 12,000 B-17 seconds were built. More than 4,700 never returned. Yet for every fortress lost, others filled the sky behind her, steady, relentless, unbroken. In 1946, a reporter asks Ellison, now retired, what he remembers most about those missions. He thinks for a long time before answering. It wasn't the bombing, he says quietly. It was the sound. That deep hum when all 4 engines were in tune like a heartbeat big enough for 10 men, you could feel it in your bones. That sound meant you were still alive. He pauses, eyes distant. The Japanese used to call us slow and clumsy. They weren't wrong, but they learned something. A slow fortress can still rain hell when it refuses to fall. It's 30. The interviewer writes it down, not realizing he's capturing the epitaph of an era. Somewhere, preserved in a museum hangar, Thunderer gleams under soft light. Children press their faces to the glass, tracing the name painted on her nose. The guide tells them how she flew through flak and fighters, how her crew faced death at 30,000 feet and came home again. Outside, the world is at peace for now. The sky is blue and empty. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The distant echo of engines, the metallic thunder rolling across time, and the defiant hum of the bomber that turned ridicule into legend. The B-17 Flying Fortress, mocked by its enemies, loved by its crew, and forever etched into the sky it once ruled.